There was no forward movement, nothing save that in the brain of David Carroll salient facts were being seized upon and meticulously catalogued for future reference. Cartwright and Reed, the plainclothesmen detailed to shadow William Barker, reported nothing suspicious in that gentleman's movements. He seemed to be making no effort to secure employment, but, on the other hand, there was little of interest in what he did do. Again the stone wall of negative action. Barker spent his mornings in his boarding house, apparently luxuriating in long slumbers. He ate always at the same cheap restaurant, and his afternoons and evenings were devoted largely to the science of 8-ball pool at Kelly's place. There may have been significance in his loyalty to Kelly's place, but if there was, it was too vague for Carroll to consider. He merely remembered the fact that Barker was a steady patron of the pool room near the Union Station, and filed it away with his other threads of information concerning the murder. Carroll was frankly puzzled. The case differed widely from any other with which he had ever come in contact. Usually there was an array of persons upon whom suspicion could be justly thrown, a collection of suspects from whom the investigator could take his choice, or from whom he could extract facts which eventually might be used to corner the guilty person. In the present case there was no one to whom he could turn an accusing finger. Of course he was convinced that William Barker knew a great deal about the crime and the events which preceded it, but Barker wouldn't talk, and he, Carroll, had no evidence that enabled him to bluff, to draw Barker out against his will. The crime seemed to have lost itself in the sleety cold of the December midnight upon which it was committed. The trails were not blind; there were simply no trails. The circumstances baffled explanation: a lone woman entering an empty taxicab, a run to a distant point in the city, the discovery of the woman's disappearance, and, in her stead, the sight of the dead body of a prominent society man. That, and the further blind information that the suitcase which the woman had carried was the property of the man whose body was huddled horribly in the taxicab. The woman, whoever she was, had either been unusually clever or unusually lucky. Minute examination of the interior of the cab had revealed nothing, not a fingerprint, nor a scrap of handkerchief. There was absolutely nothing which could serve as a clue in establishing her identity. And yet, somewhere in the city, a city of 200,000 souls, was the woman who could clear up the mystery. Convinced that she was prominent socially, Carroll kept a close eye upon the departures of society women for other cities. His vigil had been unrewarded thus far, and the public as a whole waited eagerly for her apprehension, for the public was unanimous in the belief that the woman in the taxicab was the person who had ended Warren's life. The very fact of having nothing definite upon which to work was getting on Carroll's usually equable nerves. He had little to say to Leverage regarding the case, for the simple reason that there was very little which could be said. Leverage, on his part, watched the detective with keen interest, sympathizing with him, and exhibiting implicit confidence. But the men didn't agree upon the correct procedure. Leverage was all for arresting Barker and charging him with the murder. "You'll learn some facts then, Carroll," he insisted. But Carroll shook his head. "It wouldn't get us anywhere, Eric. We couldn't prove him guilty." "No, but that don't make no difference. Of course the law says a man is innocent until you prove he ain't, but that ain't what the law does. If we arrest this here Mr. William Barker, everybody's going to believe he's guilty until he proves himself innocent." "And you think he can't do that?" "No. At least I'm gambling on this. Barker can't prove himself innocent without telling who is guilty." But Carroll refused to arrest the man. He knew that Leverage disapproved, but he also knew that Leverage was sportsman enough to let him handle the case in his own way. On one of his long strolls through the downtown section of the city, daily walks which helped him to think connectedly, David Carroll felt a hand on his arm and heard an eager feminine voice in his ear. "Gracious goodness! If it isn't the perfectly marvelous Mr. David Carroll!" Carroll bowed instinctively. Then his lips expanded into the first wholesome smile he had experienced in 48 hours. "Miss Evelyn Rogers! You did recognize me, didn't you? How simply splendiferous! I'm awfully glad we met." "So am I, Miss Rogers." She dropped her voice confidentially. "Will you do me a great favor, an enormous favor?" "Certainly. What is it?" "It's this." She looked around carefully. "I told some of my friends that you are a friend of mine, and they don't believe it. They're over yonder in that ice cream place. Now, what I want you to do for me is to show 'em. I want you to take me over there and buy me an ice cream soda." Carroll laughed aloud as he took her by the arm and piloted her through the traffic. He asked only one question. "What flavor?" Chapter 9. Roger Mallin.